Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Zoom this afternoon for the final in our three arts industry events discussions that we've been running in collaboration with Living Record Festival. And today we are looking at the topic of audiences of geography versus audiences of interest, which makes it sound like it's like a battle, like some kind of Japanese kaiju monster film, but in fact is an opportunity, really, I think, to explore the topic of what audiences are, where they come from, how we might go about reaching them, the roles that artists play in reaching these audiences, the roles that venues might play, and I guess also a little bit like the roles that audiences themselves play in finding digital and non-time specific events. Um, I'm really excited to be joined today by Alex Kelly from Third Angel and Paula Varjak, both of whom make really interesting work in a variety of different ways, both of whom have explored digital performance and or hybrid work. And yeah, I thought it'd be a wonderful opportunity to hear from both of them about some of the stuff that they've been working on over the last few years, how a pivot into digital and sort of the effects that COVID and everybody suddenly going online had on the choices that they made as artists and as creative teams. And that after we'd sort of heard a little bit more about the work that they've been making or what inspired them to work in those ways, we would then open up into a slightly more broader conversation in which we will have a chance to sort of ask these questions about, well, what are these types of audiences? What are the roles that the two sides have to play in developing this work going forwards? We are recording it, so that's great news. It will go up onto the Place Bedford's YouTube channel. It'll be up there for about 2 weeks. So there's a chance, if you want to come back, if you need to jump off for whatever reason, that you can come back to it later and watch it again. Unfortunately, we don't have BSL with us today, but I believe you should be able to turn on the automatic captioning with Zoom if you need that. And we will make sure, of course, that the YouTube video that goes up has captioning on it as well, should you need those things. If you've got any thoughts, if you want to join the discussion as we're going through it, please use the chat. It's open right now. Questions, thoughts, provocations, any of those things, please feel free to throw them into the Zoom chat. And if you have any technical issues or technical problems, my colleague Simao is also in this chat, and you can just message him and say, I've got a problem, how do I fix this? And hopefully he should be able to sort that for you. Otherwise, sit back, make sure you've got a cup of tea and a drink, and look forward to sort of hearing more from you as we go along. But without any further waffle from me, Paula, welcome to our discussion. Would you like to start off by introducing yourself a little bit and then lead off with the presentation?
Cool. Okay. Yeah, my name is Paula. I did briefly rename myself to Alexa because I felt a little bit left out, but I'll do the best as I can with an odd name out. I'm an artist working in performance, video, and participation. I suppose previously I was known as having a quote-unquote multimedia practice, which I always thought was a bit of a weird word. I'm increasingly being seen as someone who has a digital practice, which I think is kind of an odd word too. I'm not really even sure what people mean when they say digital most of the time. It sort of means everything and nothing. And I also am very strongly against the idea of digital and live as antonyms, because this is a digital live conversation. And so I know it's semantic, but I prefer saying things like face-to-face or in-person work. And that's a big deal for me. I suppose one thing that is particular, though, about my relationship to quote-unquote digital is that I was a blogger long before I was a performance maker. I was creating quote-unquote content before that was a word that was used. I'm kind of a child of MySpace, which makes me feel a bit old, but is probably quite accurate. And so that way of just making something for your webcam or making something with a device was something I was doing before and found myself returning to during the pandemic. And I guess the other thing maybe that for me really underpins a lot of my thoughts around quote unquote digital is audience experience and audience engagement. And I think that's mainly because the first thing I realized is that removed from a studio theater space, suddenly there were so many things that I took for granted that focus an audience and create a sense of being part of a collective. So the example I usually give is if you're seeing a traditional show in a studio theater, even if it's so-called like experimental or devised, there's still this thing of you buy a ticket, there's a sense of event around that, you're taking public transport to get there, you pick up the ticket, you get an overpriced beverage, you run into people you know, you're using your seats, and all of these things are cues focusing you onto the fact that the performance is about to begin while you're building awareness of being part of an audience. So by the time the performance actually starts, you're kind of settled in for it, and the contract is you're tapped into that space. This is something interestingly I saw the panel Tom Mansfield of Upstart was in as well, where I think as all these sort of experiments started to happen into the first phase of the pandemic in 2020, there was quite a lot of interest in sharing content and creating experiences of the work, but there was very little thought I found around everything around that. And what I was really surprised to discover is I didn't really miss the theater part as much as I thought I might, but I really miss being part of an audience. And I also really became aware of the fact that I couldn't assume that there were these characteristics, that someone would be experiencing something in the same way. So I had to really think about who I was speaking to and why and how they might be experiencing it. So everything I'm going to kind of whip through over the next like 15 to 20 minutes is about experiences that I was part of that I thought were strong examples of engaging audience experiences in online work. So if we do this right, you will not see the chaos that is my desktop, and you will just see this slightly corporate looking keynote presentation. Okay, so I'm not going to say all these questions out loud, but these are all the things that I think any maker should really consider at the beginning of making a work. But I think particularly when you're making an online experience, I think there's really starting from the point of how do you want someone to feel, and maybe even any kind of ideal settings you want to have in place in terms of how they might experience the work. And I think when we start to talk about interaction, which I'm particularly curious what Alex Kelly is going to say about this, interaction opens up a whole other trove of questions about how someone might interact, how you can encourage them to interact, how they might feel comfortable when other audience members are there, and so on. And I think that none of that is new, but I do think there's just about giving it a different kind of consideration than making a theater show, or indeed, I would say, a film. The first example that I wanted to kind of share is not a digital work, but draws on digital culture, which again, I think keys into the fact that none of this idea of working in response to and with digital culture is new. Brian LaBelle made a piece called Purge, which initially was a sort of live art performative installation and then was adapted into a theater show, where Brian took votes from an audience about whether to keep or delete the friends in his Facebook profile. And there's something to me that I think kind of points to some of the work I find interesting in the period of the last 2 years. Okay, so I've tried to categorize them in a way. Performances for small audience. I am really, really interested in WhatsApp as a platform for performance, much, much more so, I would say, than Zoom. What I really love about this piece on Red is it's incredibly simple. You sign up and you get a series of text messages from a character who is effectively Coco from over a 12-hour period. And what's beautiful about how it's framed is it becomes clear that the person who's messaging you is an ex. You have broken up with them, you are ignoring their messages, and this story plays out over a series of messages. And again, very simple, very engaging, quite live, even though it's just these series of texts. And I'm kind of surprised more people don't play with that platform. This is a piece that I made during my MA, which was an audio walk called Look Down at Your Hands. I just kept it in as a slide because to me, it speaks to the fact I was interested in these audio experiences for quite a while. Homeward Housebound is a phone call performance by Stacey McKeeshy. It takes place over about 20 minutes. Stacy talks you through a series of very simple rituals like opening your refrigerator or flushing your toilet or looking at your reflection. And along these are all a series of kind of playful thoughts and meditations around what it means to be alive and also about loss. It's very intimate. The other thing I think that's really beautiful about it is there's a kind of aftercare element embedded in by the producer, because it does play into feelings of loss quite strongly, and it can really trigger people. It did really affect me, I have to say. But immediately afterwards, every single person who is booked for the performance gets a call from the producer and a check-in to make sure they're okay. And I think, again, there's something about thinking about creating experiences that might particularly affect people when they're on their own and when they're at home, and how the difference of intimacy, I think, sometimes means we need to think a bit more about care as well, as I think this piece did. Swimming Home is a piece by Sylvia Mercurial about a relationship with swimming pools, and water. There's a version of the piece where you can get a gift box. I'm really into these ideas of tangible artifacts that accompany a performance, which I think Alex is going to speak about in Distraction Agents 2, which I'm really keen to hear more about. I think there is this thing about when we think about digital, we forget that analog exists as well, and that simple things like having the same prop as someone else or being spoken to about an object while you're holding an object can make things feel more concrete and kind of embed in our imaginations more. In line with that, Gudrun Soley, her piece Elysian, was a piece that was meant to be a studio piece at Gift Festival just as the pandemic kind of hit. She adapted it as a Zoom piece, and what was really beautiful about it is she was very honest about the fact she never expected to be doing this piece in her living room. And again, I think sometimes actually speaking to the real life of the situations we're in, rather than trying to pretend we're in another situation, sometimes can bring its own kind of magic. Karen, I said, what I thought was really exciting about this piece by Bentertainment is it's a series of characters of women who are kind of Karens, I suppose, set in different digital spaces. My personal favorite was this one, who's a Karen who's running an anti-racism group on Zoom. And all the tropes of a Zoom group, for example, the chat derailing the main conversation, participants in the group acting up and complaining, everything was embedded in the world of Zoom. It probably would feel very 2020 if we looked at it now, but I think there was something about using the architecture and the tropes of that space and actually playing into it rather than it just being a streaming channel to be for something else. Which makes me think of digital foyers and gathering spaces. So Shit Theater have an interactive version of their show, Shit Actually, playing on Love Actually. The original face-to-face version had a lot of audience interaction. In the version that they streamed from home, they had a WhatsApp watch-along. I became obsessed with WhatsApp watch-alongs with various forms of online stream performances I had over the last 2 years. I think my favorite thing about them is they create a new way for audiences feeling aware of each other, where some people can opt in literally to talking through a performance the way people might tweet through a television show like Strictly. But if you don't want to be a part of that conversation, you find it distracting, as I often do with chats in Zoom, for example, then you just don't have to follow the group, or you can come in and out of it. My White Best Friend was a Zoom adaptation of a show, My White Best Friend, which is still touring. The version that was done through Black Ticket Project at the Royal Court in 2020 involved actors who had, the monologues were written as letters that the actors opened and read in real time. But the other thing that was really beautiful about the way it was constructed is it had a foyer. So you saw everyone kind of arrive on Zoom, but the Royal Court encouraged you to arrive about half an hour earlier. There was a DJ, the stage manager did the calls, and the show was about to start, and all this kind of like ritual we're used to in the theater. And then, because of the themes being potentially triggering, particularly for Black people and people of the diaspora, there was an audience chat group afterwards for Black people only to participate and part of for anything that the show brought up for them. So again, care was really thought through. I'm Alanya, which is my own piece that I made with my collaborator Chuck Blue Lowry, built on some of these things I've said of the various digital foyers and interactive experiences. We use Gather to create a digital island where people were invited to gather before the show and meet people, in fact, even watch the show with people in other parts of the world. It also felt relevant to us because the show was a show about borders and nationality and immigration, and we liked the idea of our audience having to choose an avatar, navigate themselves around a new country effectively before the show began, but also have a place to come back to and discuss the show if they wanted to after the show. And then we invited a guest artist each night to be part of that conversation so they could have it facilitated but open and not be worried about saying things that might offend us as artists. And also because we felt that was more interesting than a traditional post show about process. It was really more about talking about what the themes brought up for them. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Okay, I guess I just want to say a little bit about instructions. I think if you're making a piece for online and you're considering your audience, I think it's really, really worth considering instructions, even really simple instructions for short form pieces, like, would you prefer people to wear headphones for the work? Would you like them to be on their own? What time of day might be adequate? Is there anything that you feel would really bring more to the setting? Do you want them to have a drink? Are there going to be instructions for them to take a sip at some point? Things like that. But then it's also worth mentioning that you have to be careful of how much instruction you give. And you also always have to acknowledge that you can make recommendations about an ideal way of viewing or experiencing work, but that doesn't mean people will follow them. They might stop and start. They may play it out loud. They may not use headphones, but you can encourage them. You can try. I think there's something worth thinking about it. Yeah, and then I just had a little bit here. Durational work. So one thing I do really like Zoom for, in terms of Zoom performance, is playing with it as a durational space. Greg Wohead made this piece called Crack of Dawn. I think it went over 72 hours. That seems crazy now. Maybe it was 48, but 48 to 72 hours straight of this split screen of 4 performers. And it was kind of perfectly suited, I think, for online performance, because there was something beautiful about the fact that you could log in at any point in that period and they were just going and they never left. And then I wanted to end with a little clip from Party Skills from the End of the World, which was one of my favorite and slightly more recent experiences by Nigel and Louise. So this was a piece originally, it was designed for Manchester International Festival in an old university building. There were like dozens and dozens of rooms hosted by different artists that all taught you party tricks, and it culminated in this big event, and there was a party. For the lockdown version, there were loads and loads and loads of breakout spaces. Nigel and Louise hosted it, and you as a participant audience member who's given a long list of things you need to bring for these party tricks are shuttled around these different breakout rooms where different artists take you through these games. But I think the thing that I liked most about it, I'm going to show you, is a trick that they used in OBS where they could multiply the screens. And one of the things I really hate as an audience of online work on Zoom, and this sounds particularly funny to say right now, is I don't really like seeing myself on screen. But what I found is when you use OBS, which is a streaming platform, to multiply the screens, you can create these amazing effects where
nice, Jane.
When there's a multitude of screens, suddenly you feel more invisible, but also kind of more part of a crowd. I want to show you like their big DJ sequence at the end. Okay, so that was a lot of different examples, a whole myriad of different examples of considering audience. But I think the most important thing for me to leave with is before you make any piece of work, you should really be thinking about who it is and why you're talking to them. But I definitely think with an online work, you need to consider it that much more.
Awesome. Oh, thank you so much, Paula. We didn't quite catch the video bit at the end there because I think you were on a different channel, but we can dig it out and show.
I'll drop it in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Yes, so many. I've got so many great sort of conversation jumping off points from that as well, around all of that. But a really nice overview of some of the work that's already out there, and I love the way that you are so interested in centering those questions around like the audience contract and the artist audience contract, and how you reframe that for a for a piece, for a world in which people are doing different things at different times in different ways and engaging with things at different levels, and the sense of like, yeah, what is live? Everything, like, I don't ever think that anything in my life is not live. Even if I'm watching an old film, I still am having a live experience. So yeah, a slight change of the way that we use language is required when we start to talk about yes, digital and everything beyond that. Awesome. Alex, shall we throw over to you, and you can lead off as well, and then we can have a wider conversation and a bit of a chat.
Yeah, cool. I feel like I haven't got enough to talk about really after that brilliant overview of all that work, Paula. So, I'm just going to talk about one project now. But yeah, and I've got a couple of points for the discussion actually after some of those questions you asked, Paula, because there's some really great stuff in there, and some of those. Yeah, but I think that question about what platform are you going to use is so important. And just when we, right from the outset, Third Angel didn't make work for studio spaces, and then when we started putting work in studio spaces, we remember our first tour of like black box studio spaces. We kind of made one like the first version of it and just assumed, oh well, it will always be like this in all of those spaces, and then discovered that all those black boxes are actually really different. Like just for just like really naively, oh, the lighting rigs are really different. Oh, they don't have one of those lights, and you realize that actually you need a flexible space, and you're still sighted in those spaces. But then we did a piece in a black box studio space or that could fit into those spaces, where we didn't have any seats for the audience, and we just never bothered to mention that in the publicity. And watching people come in and just stop because they were in a gallery, they'd walked into a theatre, but it felt like a gallery, and they could just walk around, and we hadn't it wasn't billed as a promenade performance, and that was a real moment for us of like, right, all the bets are off now, because there aren't any seats, so there aren't any rules, and they could anyway. So, and I think that's really, we're still working out as the public, we're working out what the rules of Zoom are, and so we're working out what the rules of Zoom performances are. Anyway, so I am going to share. I've got a quick PowerPoint. So how do Alex, how do I share my screen? There's a big green button that says share my screen, and I want to share one particular window, and I want to share that window, and I'm going to share it. Are you I am screen sharing. Am I screen sharing?
Yep, we can see you. We can see that.
Okay. That's weird. Okay, that's freaking me out a bit, because in my Zoom window, I can just see the three of us. I can't see that I'm sharing my screen, but okay. So I'm going to talk very briefly about a couple of theatre projects, just because they're the relevant background. So this is an image of a show called O Grande Livro dos Pequenos Detalhes. My pronunciation is probably terrible. That's Portuguese. This is a project by a Brazilian-Portuguese collaboration called Macriação. Paula Diogo, who is the performer climbing a ladder, she invited me to contribute text to a devising process to make a show about looking at the world differently. And so I brought the idea of using detective stories, and because I'm a bit obsessed with detective stories, and an organisation that I'd identified during some Third Angel work for something called the Department of Corrections and Clarifications, who later became known as the Department of Distractions, we realised. And their job, they're the organisation who put individual gloves and little shoes in the middle of the street and stuff, little things that make you go, oh, what's going on over there, and distract you from whatever else you were thinking about. And I created 2 completely distinct texts for that show. One set in the office, the Brazilian office of the Department of Distractions, and one a detective story, but sort of based a little bit on the buddy detective dynamic of Moonlighting, which I was a bit obsessed with in the 80s, which is still in many ways some really, really clever TV writing, and also really dated 80s, nowhere near as forward thinking as you think you are writing. And those 2 texts were they were sort of set in the same world, but they only made very oblique reference to each other. And then when Third Angel was interested in making that into a show, Rachel Walton, my co-director, got me to rewrite it and actually make sense of the 2 texts being together. And we made our version of the show, the Department of Distractions, which is a play. And the characters don't, for us, this is really unusual, the characters don't talk to the audience at all. The fourth wall is very clearly in place, but the department, we spend like a day in their office with them. They tell each other lots of stories, and we get to do our we're showing you how we're telling this story and telling you the story at the same time game that we like to do in our theatre work. We get to do that because we're watching the department tell each other stories as they pitch ideas to each other. And they tell a detective story, and can't really say any more about it without giving away any spoilers. But as you can see, it's a theatre show with lots of storytelling and quite a big set. And we use lighting a lot, and they have a workroom where they get to pitch and act out these different stories to each other. And we use a lot of what look like Polaroids there at the back of the set, are actually Instagram photographs that are printed out onto cards, and we put them underneath a camera linked to a projector during the show as a way of indicating the location that this particular scene is happening in. So this scene is happening in a posh bar. So we've got a photo there of some whiskey with some rosemary stuck on top of it. That we found on Instagram. So this is the show we were touring when the pandemic hit, and we had to pull half of this tour. And this was probably at that point in terms of our theatre work the most successful show we'd made. All the venues we went to, we got the biggest audience we'd had in that venue before, and we were really pleased with it. So we were really disappointed to bring the tour to an end. But we decided at that point, to answer your question about the pivot to digital, because we'd done lots of work over the years that wasn't in theatre spaces, and we'd started making work not in theatre spaces. We just decided that we wouldn't aim to go back to theatres for the rest of 2020 or 2021. I think we did have to sort of reassure our board that that was okay. And then what I need to tell you about is how much I love role-playing games. And I started with and it probably all goes back to my love of what are known generically as choose your own adventure books. And there are definitely people out there that claim the Choose Your Own Adventure series were the first books to do that, choosing your own adventure. But I think these tracker books that I had when I was very little actually predate Choose Your Own Adventure. This was something we were interested in. The format of choosing your own adventure is something we've often talked about playing with audiences, and those have been part of the process of making work quite regularly, though rarely, it's never actually turned into a show as the final mechanism for a show. And of course, it became very popular again when Bandersnatch came out, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So we were also interested in, someone had said to us at one point, or it had come up in a discussion with our board, because the Department of Distractions was quite successful, about how unusual it is for a theatre show to have a sequel, the way whereas sequels in film and TV and books are much more common. And we started wondering about another project set in the world of the Department of Distractions. We would also, over the years, really enjoyed using game mechanics in making shows and in the way we work with an audience, and finding some sort of mechanic or turn-taking device that makes an audience want to participate rather than feel they're obliged to participate. And we'd done a couple of shows in the past that had mechanics that we liked. We did a project called My Favorite Christmas Present Ever, which was a one-to-one conversation piece where I would invite an audience member to make a Christmas card using a stamp that said my favorite ever Christmas present, and inside to write a little story about the favorite Christmas present they ever had, and then to write their name and address on an envelope, but not to put their card in it. And then at the end of the day, shuffle the cards and envelopes, and you get a card from someone else who's been to the performance with their story of their favorite ever Christmas present. And we just really liked putting something in the post to people, and had gone, oh, that's really good. And we'd done a project called Pleasant Land almost 20 years ago now, where we traveled around England asking people where England was and what Englishness is. And we made digital postcards, and once a month you would get a digital photograph from us with a digital text, not on the back of it because it came as an email, but underneath it. And they were both things where we thought we want to do more of that. So the Distraction Agents evolved from the Department of Distractions, with all of those things sort of bubbling away, as something we'd wanted to go back to. And I suppose we didn't do this because of the pandemic, but the pandemic allowed us to move it up our priority list. And we were really keen to provide as much employment for freelancers as we could. So we invited the Department of Distractions touring team to come back and make this project with us. So if you sign up for the Distraction Agents, as an audience member, you become a new employee. The show, the Department of Distractions, one of the characters, Daphne, turns up at the department for her first day of work, having worked her way up through something called Street Team. And in the Distraction Agents game, you're recruited as a distraction agent, and you maybe reply to an advert like this. Maybe you've seen the show, maybe you haven't. In the second run of it, people were allowed to buy it for their friends, and it would turn up anonymously through people's doors. And what you get is a mystery package turns up after you've signed up for it, and then you get an email inviting you to log on to a website which has got a load of videos of instructions, but you open the box and you get this collection of objects, a letter saying don't open anything until you've been told to in an instruction video, and then you get so this is a still, again, I'm trying hard not to do any spoilers. This is still from the first instruction video where Lockhart welcomes you to work for the department and sort of tells you how to get the best out of your training. And then you meet all of the characters again in individual videos where they invite you to pursue some tasks. And these are the sorts of things you get. And this is one of the tasks. And so you can engage with this project basically on 3 levels. You could just watch the videos where they they give you some suggestions of things to do, and you could read the puzzles or look at the resources, but not actually bother to work out the puzzles if you don't want to. Hopefully they're written in an entertaining way, so it's sort of fun to go through anyway. And so you could be relatively, I hate using this word in relation to audiences because I don't think any are, but I suppose at the more passive end of the spectrum, you could just read and watch. Or you can engage more actively and you can do all the puzzles, and hopefully you work out a 4-digit code that you can open a little padlock and get a little reward. Or each day, on top of the puzzles, there is an extra task or an extra challenge that you don't need to do in order to get the prize, but you can go out into the street and look out for example, all of these sorts of distractions, and give yourself points, and it might inspire you to create some distractions out in the street. And so so the first time we did it, we ran it very much as a show. You signed up for it for a particular week, and over 5 days you got a series of emails with the different videos. And I suppose in some ways that's the sort of the pure version of the show, and I really liked running that over 5 days and getting emails back from people and stuff. But we knew from the statistics of people looking at it on Eventbrite, and what people told us is they kept waiting for a week where their whole family could play it, and they just never, none of the 4 weeks we ran it for was convenient. And so we really had to listen to that, how people were telling us they wanted to play it. And for the second run, we made a few adjustments to the way you signed up for it and the way you get the videos. And you basically now you get the box and you get a single email that says, this is where all the videos are, play it at your own pace. And it was much more popular like that, I have to say. And also you could buy it for a friend and send it to them, either with a letter from you saying, this is, I bought you this, or we know what some people did is they just put it in the post to people, and so they would get one of those boxes with a letter saying a nomination for notification of nomination for training as a distraction agent, and you might not know who had bought it for you. And so what was really interesting to us is that because we were selling it as a game, we sent out press releases to a lot more game review sites and game review blogs, and so we definitely got a really different audience. And there is a point where, although it is games and puzzles, there is a trajectory where there is a narrative going on that you are implicated in as a player, and there's a bit where, and hopefully this isn't a spoiler if people haven't played it yet, the instructions you get are not completely candid, and a couple of the game review bloggers did sort of point that out and go, but then this happens. And so there is it is hopefully playing interestingly in the territory between a show and a game. But what we were really pleased that we had done, well, I'm not sure how knowingly we'd done this, is that you can just play it at your table and you have a similar experience to anyone else. But as soon as you start embracing the challenges to engage with the world, actually the experience of the game goes out into your life with you. And so it becomes different depending on where you live, whether you live in a town or a village or a city, because the distractions you'll see in the street, for example, will be different. Okay, I'm going to stop because I've probably gone on for ages. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Not ages at all. Perfect. Thank you, Alex.
Okay.
It's the problem with when you're sitting in your own room and you can't see anybody else around you. Wow, what is time?
Yeah, what is time? Yeah, that's the next show.
Brilliant. Really interesting to see, and obviously I've seen and talked to Alex a few times since 2020, and seen that that grow and played it as well. So at some point, I'm going to ask you why I can't get into my little bag, because maybe I'm just not big.
You can, you can email the department. Just reply to your emails, and admit to your new bosses that you can't do.
I'm rubbish.
Email helps you. All right.
I think there's some really interesting stuff there to sort of leap on and to start a conversation. And I've got a handful of like comments and thoughts, but some questions as well. And I'd like as a starting point to kind of to loop back to this idea of audience and who are they? How do you find them? Because I guess when Paula starts with the provocation, know who your audience that you're making your show for is. My immediate want to sort of be like to say is, and following on from that, how do you get to them? Because knowing who you want to reach and knowing how to reach them might be different tools. So that's the wider question is how do you reach people for this type of work? What are the methods? What's the methods? How have you done that in the past? And through that, what is the role that a bricks and mortar organization, a venue, a place that's supposed to have geography on its side, what's the role of those kinds of organizations in helping artists to do that? Does anyone want to lead off responding to that or not? I
want to intersect. I think it's like a triage kind of. It's I appreciate saying know who your audience is really daunting. So maybe I'd like to reframe that as think about who your audience is or who you might want it to be, which is because I feel like if you open with know who your audience is, I'm someone who really leads from thinking about how do I want to connect. But I also have many amazing, talented, brilliant artist friends who do not think about who they're making it for and make wonderful, engaging work that audiences love. So you can make something fully for yourself. And if you're lucky, you might be one of those artists that works. I tend to think about who do I want to talk to and how to get there. But if it's like, consider who your audience is or who you might want it to be. How do you want to engage with them? Like, how do you want them to feel? And then how do you reach them? I think they're this. I want them to experience this. Great. Now how, you know? And I think in the how, I think the reason I watched so much over the last 2 years is I think, if I go back to the old model of Edinburgh, for example, I learned so much in my 4th or 5th year of going to Edinburgh where I didn't bring a show. And I really, really wish the first 2 years that actually I just went as a punter and saw a ton of stuff. Because the funny thing is you can get very, I think solo performance especially, because I've got very little experience working in a company like you have, Alex, but there's this thing of everything being about you and everything feeling very personal. And as soon as you're the person who is running from one side of Edinburgh to the next, you could hear the most passionate, wonderful plea from an artist to see something. But if you've booked for 10 things in that day, you're simply not going to be able to see it. Or you notice suddenly sitting in a space, oh wow, the eye line here is like really weird, or oh, this time of day is kind of odd, or oh my gosh, I've seen something really heavy and there's nothing to kind of hold me. All these things go into play. And then when you start being aware of all that, you make quite differently, I would say. So I think the thing for me about seeing all this stuff was, you know, when I realized I didn't know how long we were going to be in the situation that they are and going with the pandemic, I thought, okay, this is my chance to build an audience, find different ways of building an audience, like thinking, how can I creatively use social media and so on. But also this is my chance to really see the different ways people are experimenting and figure out what I want to borrow from and steal, you know? Great, I'll have that. That's working. What can I use? Brilliant. And I think weirdly, it seems like there's quite a lot of I want to make this and why won't people see it, I think, out in the ether, and not nearly enough reaching out and going, what else are other people doing? How can I build a community? How can I support the kind of work that I want to see made? It would be my first little offer. And since Alex Kelly laughed at my Edinburgh example, I really would love to hear what you have to say in response.
Oh, so for and it is. I think the Edinburgh Fringe is really interesting, isn't it? Because so there's a big chunk of the audience, and also the people who aren't an audience for theatre, they all know about the Fringe, and so early on in in Third Angel's career, like every year, people had, as soon as we're a theatre company. Oh, you're going to Edinburgh this summer? Like, no, why would we do that? Why on earth would we do this thing that we have crafted and spent money on? And it usually takes us like between 6 and 7 hours to set it up in the theatre space. Why would we go and do that in half an hour and and spend all of this money and stuff? And then we got invited to take our show as part of the British Council Showcase, and we were like, we can't. All right, so that is a massive opportunity. Let's do it. And so I'd been as an audience a few times, and so I think we knew a little bit that the thing. There are a few shows that get really good reviews and are suddenly really successful, and then there are shows that get good reviews but still no one goes to see, and actually in the end, word of mouth in Edinburgh is really important. And one of the ways you can kickstart that is like flyering and talking to people about the show is really important. And one of the first times I went as an audience member in Edinburgh, there was one of the performers from Fecund Theatre, who I don't know if Fecund Theatre are still going, but they were like a must-see in Edinburgh for like quite a few years. When I was a student, and one of their performers came up to me, and she'd got these flyers, and the flyers were a distinctive shape. They were really like long and thin, and they'd got a bit of silver on them, and she'd only got like maybe sort of 10 or 11 of them in her hands. And she sort of went to offer me a flyer, and then she took it back. and she said, "Can I just check? Like, this show is on at 4 o'clock. So are you going to be able to see it?" And I was like, I want one of those flyers. I want one of those flyers. And it's like, whereas other people like the buckets and buckets of flyers. And there was and I don't know how consciously she was doing that. Maybe they were just her last 10 flyers and she'd started the day with 1,000. I don't know. But there was something about that. And I was like, well, tell me, she wasn't just giving anyone a flyer. I felt like she'd gone, I think you might like this show. But actually, I want to give this flyer to someone else who is going to like the show if you can't make it. And just those little things. Now, that's not a very productive one, because I chatted for about 10 minutes. So that's only 6 potential audience members an hour she's getting to. But I did go and see the show. And I just, so there's just.
But then can you imagine though? That's really interesting, because what she's done is she's infused everyone who comes in that space to feel exclusive and unique and invited. And
I'm
that
the audience
means
for this show.
Yeah, like a really on-side audience for a show.
Yeah.
That is in the world of what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
Scarcity, isn't it? It's I've created this thing where this is a scarce resource that I'm only going to give out to those, as opposed to you should throw it everywhere. I think Edinburgh is also a really interesting, and I hadn't thought about this until we started discussing it, but it is an interesting kind of real world, physical world, exploration, or like case study in these ideas of audiences of interest and audiences of geography. Because prior to recently, with Assembly sort of actually having a base up in the city permanently year round, and the work that the Traverse have done over the years to to build on, and then to have a really big base during the festival. A large amount of the audience for the Edinburgh Festival are not the people of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Certainly when it sits in the center, the stuff that sits in the center of it. And so there is a real sense there that in the physical world, you have organizations that have popped up specifically to build their own external audiences of interest. People who are interested in fringe theatre, people who are interested in stand-up comedy, live music, big pop-up events, those kinds of things, who have moved into a physical space, and they're not really focused on reaching the people of Edinburgh and in the Hibernian area of Scotland. They're very happy to bring people in from anywhere, literally from all over the world, to be participants and to be audience members in these things. And I hadn't considered that there was a real world example of something that I'm seeing in the digital space as well, which is the sense of like, what is I come at this as a venue primarily, and I go, what is the role of a venue? Well, like normally our role is to try and get people to physically come to our building. Who are those people going to be? Probably for somewhere like the Place Bedford, they're going to be relatively local, if not even within half a mile of where we are. And so they're going to be coming to us because we're on their doorstep. When we then move into working in digital or with stuff that can be mailed out or hybrid work, we see artists coming to us and they go, we really want to bring our show to the Place Bedford. You seem to be really interested in digital work. And I'm like, we are. But what is it that we can do to help you get audiences? Because we know that there's probably a finite resource of people within our sphere of influence who we can tie into your show, can tie into your event, can tie into your idea. And if you want us then to work outside of our geographic borders, well, we're kind of just as on the back foot as you are when it comes to knowing where to go and how to reach out and get that. If your show can be, or your event, or your activity can be consumed by everyone from Teesside to Tel Aviv and everywhere in between. Well, how do we help you reach those people outside of the boundaries of England, let alone anywhere else? And I've seen this come up a few times in stuff that you've run with the Digital Performance Network, Paula, of this question of like, well, why are we still so hung up on venues?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fair point. My answer to that is I mean, I had a lot of experience in the last 2 years running events off my own back. And I mean, I've run events off my own back, like sort of like variety shows in back rooms of pubs and stuff. And in a way, doing an event on Eventbrite is not so dissimilar from that in lots of ways. But what I did find really interesting was, actually, now that I'm looking after everything, which I have to say I did not enjoy, what I did find really useful is suddenly I had all this awareness of data of audience, which I kind of never given any consideration about for the last 8 years. Like, oh, right. I know I have postcodes of who's booking my work. I know I can set my own kind of pricing strategies. I know like what is effective in terms of marketing outreach and what is not. I know, habits of who books close to the time. I have the emails so I can directly follow up myself, and then they book for another thing that I do. And all these things I quite happily given away. But the trade-off was I had to do everything. I had to look after everything. Suddenly I wasn't just, thinking about the tech and the content and any things I'm sort of bringing in and collaborators. I was also effectively tech support and box office and accounts, and I did not enjoy that at all. So pretty much as soon as I was able to work with venues again, I kind of said, yeah, okay, you can just take part of the box office. I think the model I'm now moving on to, Chuck and I are actually working with Omnibus for a festival we're doing next week, my collaborator, is a more collaborative approach with venues around things like audience data. So how can we work together to talk about the audiences we currently have and how we can both expand and kind of cross-pollinate our audiences? And in exchange for that, you are going to run things through your box office as a venue and so on. You have that infrastructure. But also, I now as an artist do not want to just go, great, and then I have no information about how I was booking my work. And they continue, particularly because I would say, arguably, I am now in a point where I have done events where I think, at least in the digital realm, they're selling well because of the work I've put into promoting and marketing. And even though the venues have been great, just judging on other things that have been booked alongside me, I know it's not just content. I know it's the heart and consideration Chuck and I put into the creativity and the way we digitally outreach as well. So I guess the thing is, I find that like a lot of venues pre-pandemic weren't doing so well in terms of audience outreach, and audience development, and especially digital marketing anyways. So when they added this new layer of, and now the work itself is digital, I think a lot of people were like, it suddenly shows up the print the season brochure 4 times a year and put a stack of flyers on the table, hope for the best mode,
I think
infrastructure, Alex Levine, that's what we want. Share your infrastructure.
Well, that's what that I think is where we ended up settling as a venue quite early on, when we started doing more digital work, was going, look, we are not experts in making work for this sphere, and we learned very quickly to use platforms like Zoom, and a lot of us were on Discord and using these kinds of things anyway. But we did have that question as what is it we actually can provide here? And the answer is, effectively, we become a service that is bought, which is they're buying the ritual. Actually, it's that thing of saying, well, if the artist sits here and that's the show, and then around that they've probably got some people supporting, people supporting it from a technical perspective. Okay, well, around that there's the I've got 400 people signed up to come to this event at this time and this place online. They're going to join the Zoom call at 7:30 or whenever, 3 o'clock in the morning. Who is online at 2:45 in the morning to take those 300 emails that say, I can't find my link. Where is my link? And that those emails are not just all coming into one place, but they might be coming in, some of them through the email, some of them through Facebook, some of them through Instagram, some of them through Twitter, some of them through whatever other platforms you've
some of them by text message to the artist's phone.
Yeah, like halfway during the performance or 3 minutes before, if you're like me.
And that we sort of have, that we forgot that was what we sort of thought about venues as being. We forgot that was what venues actually were doing in the physical world as well. That there's a reason why we want the audience to turn up half an hour, and it's in the real world as well, which is because in case people have lost their tickets or don't know where the toilets are or whatever it might be. So we realized it's our job to try and help with the ritual. That we are the ritual site, and that means being a concierge almost for the work. The fascinating thing for us, we're a non-funded, non-NPO, non-local authority funded venue. We were able to crack open some of the support funding through Cultural Recovery Fund, but it's a weird one because it changes our relationship with artists, because it makes us a little bit go, well, we're providing a service and we're paying for the work. interesting, because if we were in just a free market digital space, this might be a paid for service that we offered.
But then if you know, the artist, for example, is doing something that they are is a file that already exists, or that they are live streaming from their home, there are so many different online ticketing platforms that, okay, we'll take a cut, but it's like a relatively nominal cut, given that you then get all this data on the back end of it. What indeed are they paying you for? I mean, I think there's something about working out the transaction on both sides, and I just think it has to come back to infrastructure. It has to come back to, for example, okay, advising on whether the audience that you have, even your hyper local audience, suits the kind of work that that artist is bringing. Do you think if you marketed that show, if it was a in-person work, indeed people would be interested in that? So, you know, if you reach out to them, well, just forget the fact that anyone in the world could see it. If you feel like the demographic of your local postcodes, etc., is interested in work X, Y, or Z, then hopefully, when I as an artist bring my work to you, you will be able to help me sell it, and we will both do well from respective cuts. And in exchange for that, you will also, for example, field those ticketing inquiries for me, you know? So I'm not doing that in addition to everything else. But I'm also really interested, Alex, in I think there's a moment to think about how can we take this hyperlocal experience and maybe like patch it up with another hyperlocal experience, that, because at the end of the day, you know, you might go, I've got this very specific crowd in Bedford, but maybe there's like a small town in Germany that actually has a very similar demographic. And is there some way of partnering up? And also, like, does it have to be an hour-long or 2-hour-long theater show? Could you indeed like commission for a small bit of funding and be a bit more experimental, a series of micro commissions as a way of introducing artists to your local audiences, but also having different types of more interesting content on your online channels? I mean, I think the thing is, we're still too stuck in this, we're in a studio and we produce studio work, when I think we can take our theatrical skill set and the media fluency we just have as people who are living in this day and age and using devices all the time, to just be a bit more out of the box about things, I think. Like, I was part of a project that was through ARC last year called What's on Your Mind. And effectively what they did is it was about 10 or 12 micro commissions, but it was based on conversations with a whole number of local community groups. And that created 12 themes. So, for example, mine was alcohol. But the idea is we've had a series of discussions with local communities. They've said, we really want something that speaks to this theme that's really important specifically to us. ARC was then able to invite artists that they wanted to invite who are not necessarily locally based to make work responding to those themes. And then people locally were interested in them because they had literally been commissioned in response to those conversations. I think there's lots of ways we can use the groups we already have relationships with to grow ideas and ways of working for a bigger audience. So be really based in Bedford, but then I'd ask, it's like, really tell me who is your audience? And then I'll tell you if I have something I think that'll work with them, and then we can work out together if a collaboration could be strong. I mean, you know, hypothetically, I think.
Yeah. No.
Because your local audience in Bedford, they are, you know, all the people on your mailing list, they are probably most of them based in Bedford or nearby. But it's not everyone who's based in Bedford. It's the people in Bedford who are interested in your programming agenda, you know, and you're a venue that programs a certain sort of work, you know, a territory of work that you're interested in, and other events, you know, and like you host a role-playing club, and so there is, I think that's one of the reasons, particularly given the title of this this talk, the geographies and of interest, is that you bring in work because the place audience, it is people in Bedford, but it's people in Bedford interested in a particular thing. And if we've got a digital thing and we know you've been interested in our coming work that we bring into a black box studio space, then we've got this thing that actually your audience will like as well. And yeah, there are probably those people in each town, but we don't necessarily have that relationship with a way of getting to that town. So that's a shared interest in the audience, isn't it? That
One question I really wanted to ask you, Alex Kelly, because this has come up actually in this Digital Performance Network a lot. Is there a lot of people who are gamers who are also theater makers,
yeah,
and are interested in, really aware of the differences in those audiences, wanting to make something that crosses over in both, but no idea how. And when you said, for example, you sent PR, like press statements to kind of game reviewers as well as to theater reviewers, I just love to hear more about that and how successful it was and what advice you have around that, because I get asked that quite often and I have no idea.
yeah. I mean, it's it was really successful. We got reviewed in on Board Game and Escape Room review blogs, and I think maybe 5 of them now for this project, and they were all, and I was sort of a bit frightened by it, I must admit, that because gaming is sort of something I do because I love it, but it has also influenced my work. And if a theatre reviewer doesn't like our work, I can kind of all right, well, I might be pissed off because it might put people off coming to see it, but it's like, okay, I know that reviewer liked this and they didn't like that, and but if the gaming community hadn't liked our work, I would have been like, oh God, I'm really upset. But what I discovered is I and I have to say, it came from like the producing and marketing team, the push to go and find those reviews, and there's loads of them, that that sort of blogging community about games, and there is actually loads of products in, I suppose unsurprisingly, like the play at home games like that arrives through the post, that that's its own thing now, the escape room in a box, which and they were around before the pandemic, weren't they? But they really took off, and you look at the success of companies like Swamp Motel and stuff, there's a real demand for it. But it did, and I thought there's a really interesting thing, that all of these bloggers at the end of it, they say, we didn't pay for this experience, but it hasn't affected our review. And I just thought, theatre reviews don't do that, do they? It's just they just assume the audience know that. But there's a real, because it's a relatively new area. So this is great. This is, they are being really open about the experience, and quite a few of them did this isn't a really hard puzzle game. So if you really like puzzle games, this isn't for you. But if you like a game that will have some puzzles but will make you think about other things, or will really sort of like bother you while you're on the bus or walking to work, then this is the game for you. And they sort of, and quite a few of them really bought into the fiction of it, going, we'd love to tell you about this game, but if we did that, we'd have to kill you. And so and they're all, I'm sure, some of them make a little bit of money from ads and stuff from their blogs, but they're all doing it because they love games, and they want to share that thing. So, but we did pay someone. We have we're a funded organisation, so we have an exec producer, and we had a digital marketing manager last year, and then we also brought in a press consultant who went and found those. And we did a bit of advertising, really targeted advertising through Gamescom and stuff like that. And yeah, and it worked really well. And and I think, I don't know the exact figures, but I think something like a third of the experiences we've sold went to people who bought it as a present for someone else, which was that word of it. So there's the interesting thing, like theatre companies are always saying, oh, we'd rather come and do a longer run because then we can build up a bit of word of mouth and stuff. And we did get this time, but people could actually buy it for a friend. Oh, I played this and I enjoyed it. And you could, depending on how much you write in the booklets and stuff you get, you could like pass it on to someone else to play. But a lot of people bought it for someone else, and as I said, like really embraced the fiction of it, and just sent it anonymously, and we had to rewrite our introductory emails because people were emailing us going, "This is just up in the post. I don't know what it is." So we had to sort of retrospectively onboard them into the fictional experience. So yeah, but I think it is. I think it's a really interesting territory that between is it a game, is it a show thing, and we definitely would like to explore it more. And I think these and there's some really interesting projects coming up. I know you've worked with Chloe Machita, Alex. I don't know. I'm guessing Chloe's part of the Digital Performance Network.
Yes.
Yeah. So doing some really interesting stuff in that territory, like, is it a role-playing game? So one of the digital online performance events I watched was Chloe did a play test of a role-playing game as a performance, a project called Horizon, and so they were all testing out the system. I put it on. It's like a 3-hour durational performance of people working out how to play a game. I loved it, and I got my sketchbook out. I could do some drawing. I can listen to them. I can chew. I can go make a cup of tea. Not that much has happened, but it's like I really feel myself getting drawn into the world of this. Is it a show? Is it a game? So and I think there's definitely some more stuff to be explored there.
Because I guess the thing I've been thinking a lot about, I mean, I have like a very weird relationship with the word theater anyway, which is why I tend to say performance, because for me it feels broader, and it means I can avoid the endlessly tedious conversations about is it theater, which I really couldn't care less whether it's theater. I'm making stuff, and it's whatever it is. But I guess in terms of this audience question, sometimes I think with digital performance, maybe part of the issue is maybe it isn't, a lot of this stuff isn't for a theater audience, and that's actually okay. And like, maybe it's not about banging your head a wall going, how do we get a theater audience engaged with this? But maybe they're a gaming audience, or maybe they're a film audience, or maybe they're just into other kind of online content, and that they would very happily engage with this thing. And maybe the point of a theater audience who's really religiously a theater audience is they want things to function in a very particular way, and they don't want to, they want to have the experience of being in a room with people feeling breath together, and that's cool. I like that too, but I guess it's just, there's something about going, maybe if you sort of Rubik's Cube around what the thing is, you might find that the audience you want exists in another place, or also exists in this place in addition to a performance or theater audience. And similarly with time, I mean, I think it opens up this idea of, well, maybe something can happen over 3 hours, or maybe something can happen over 3 days, or maybe it could be on demand, or maybe it's something like that's 2 minutes that's you can just watch on your phone at any time, and they're all giving you slightly different things, and there are advantages for different things. Like maybe it's a series, like every day, every morning, you get 5 minutes for 3 months, and it suddenly opens up all these different ways of engaging, which I think is a good thing. But it means you have to market it differently, and maybe think about differently about who it's for.
And it brings, sorry, Alex. Yeah. It brings up some interesting questions that I think you mentioned in some of the examples as well, around like aftercare and the relationship that you're building with your audience. Because same as other Alex, I'm very much into games, role-playing games, board games, all of those things. And I know that you've got to jump off in about 10 minutes or so, Paula, to go and do something else on Twitch. A platform that I spend a lot of time watching stuff on, and especially during the lockdown, but even now, there are people out there who are professional game reviewers, who run live plays where they and their friends sit around and play a board game over a period of maybe 8 hours. And I have watched vast amounts of hours of people I do not know playing board games together. But the danger with that is that you build a parasocial relationship, because you are engaging in a social activity. It's just that you're not there. So there are people who I've spent hours of my life watching online, playing, doing normal person activities that I feel like I know, and I do not know them. They do not know me. So there
But
is
how is that, Alex? How is it any different from the thing that's funny when you see a famous person? Like, you know, whenever you have the experience running a famous person, is exactly that, because you have this, you have this immediate kind of embodied. Either you recognize them right away, and then something weird happens because you feel like you know them, but you absolutely don't. Or the more embarrassing version, which I've also experienced, you feel like you know them, but you can't place how, and then you realize it's because they're a famous person, which is really embarrassing because it either shows in your face, or worse, you've gone, "Do I know you?" which has also happened to me. You know, and it's also no different, I would argue, from following people on socials or reading someone's column and really having a sense of their life and what they're about. But they don't know you, I think that's quite human of the age we live in a way.
Yeah, it is exactly the same as that. I think the only thing that I would say, and maybe the socials element of it is perhaps the same thing repeated. But the thing that feels different about it is I feel I know these people from a relationship that is incredibly mundane, as opposed to a celebrity thing where it's about knowing them because of their status. It's like I guess it's about levels of celebrity, really, isn't it? It's like if lots and lots of people know you, you can't go anywhere. If only a very small number of people know you, but they know you really well, you can go most places. But someone's going to bump into someone who's going to be like, "Oh, my best friend."
I think there is. I think you're right, Paula, because I've done that. I remember the guy who made Super Size Me, Morgan Spurlock, was in Sheffield to the documentary festival, and he was in a cafe that I used to go to like almost every day. So I saw a bloke I recognised. I was in the cafe I'm in every day. I just thought, oh, that's just someone I see it regularly, and so I just thought, all right. And then it was only after just going, oh shit, I've just like made it look like I was just trying to be really cool with that famous guy.
But it must happen to him all the time, right?
So I remember it. He doesn't remember it at all. But I think there is something interesting about that sort of hanging out with people who are playing a game. Or I also think it's possibly true of people who do podcasts that are quite chatty podcasts about a theme. Like I think like some of the role-playing podcasts where people are chatting and reminiscing about the games they used to play and stuff. So that's the sort of stuff that I sometimes talk to my mates about, and you feel like you get to know these people quite well because you're hanging out with them while they're having unguarded conversations, I suppose, or not unguarded, relaxed conversations, and and they have no idea who you are, you know. So
before you have to run off, Paula, can I want to loop back round quickly to this thing that Alex brought up with the distraction agents, about seeing a big uptake in people buying and sort of gifting. You said you've got your handle on sort of the data and the people who engage with the work that you've been putting out. Have you seen any indication of that being something that happens for the kind of work that you've been either making or promoting?
Yeah, 100% the manifesto poster. So Alex Kelly, I made this show forever ago called Show Me the Money, and about what it means to make a living as an artist. And towards the end of it, I write this artist manifesto about how to survive as an artist in a crumbling economy. And I made some posters for when I did it at Edinburgh, when I toured the show and sold, I don't know, maybe like 100 or something, and kind of forgot about it. And then Nick, the AD of the Pleasance, at the beginning of the pandemic, said, you know, I bet if you printed those posters, you'd do really well. And like, over the last 2 years, I'm probably in like high, nearly 4 digits from selling that poster. And I think, it does look good. It's like really well designed. The sentiment is good. But I do think there's this thing about gifting and tangible physical objects. I bought vinyl like nobody's business in the last 2 years. And I think it's like in this increasingly screened remote space, there's real desperation of I want a thing. And also I want to gift a thing to a person that I can't see or don't get to see as often as I would like a real need for objects. But I think it was also always true. I mean, back in the day when I did spoken word, people would have like shitty little like CDs that they made that they recorded, and probably no one ever listened to those CDs. But in the same way with like, you know, rock gigs. But at the end of the concert, you want to hold on to the ephemeral thing that you can't.
Yeah, yeah,
and so if at that point you're like, here, have an object as a way of holding on to this ephemeral thing, many people will buy the object. You know, I think. And I think the idea of gifting an experience as an object is both beautiful and evil genius for the time that we're in. Yeah. So more of that, I think. If I could come up with something like that, I absolutely would, but I think I don't devise in that way.
Yeah. Objects with experience that are a key to an experience, I think, is really nice. But it was when we were making the distraction agents, it was a thing we said early on, is that it couldn't be disposable. We wanted people to get it and go, right, I want to put this on. I've done it now, and I've read all the booklets and stuff, and I've done the show, but there's no way I'm getting rid of this. I'm putting it on my shelf because I really like it as an object. And so we did, and I think we've always had a bit of that. Like I remember early on, we used to be more. We'd be so happy if we saw someone had got our flyer on their wall. There's a sandwich shop near the Crucible, and we saw that they'd got one of our flyers on the wall, and it was quite out of date. And the woman who worked there said, "No, I really like that flyer. Did you go and see the show?" "No." "Oh, we don't care because you still liked our flyer as an object."
And actually, the thing I'd add to that just occurred to me is, it has been much easier to sell that. Like, that show did really well when it toured. I can say I'm proud of that work. But it has been infinitely easier to sell the poster in the last 2 years than it was to sell tickets to the show. And that's quite interesting to me.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is, and I think that there's something there at the heart of this discussion, isn't there? That theatre audience that we were talking about, they have to buy a ticket in advance. They have to figure out how they're going to get there. They have to get public transport. They have to drive in. And they have to be there at a particular time and stuff. But digital stuff, they might still have to be there at a particular time, but they can have literally just finished their tea.
Yeah.
And they can, and they can be shouting to their kids to get into bed, while the cameras are off or whatever.
Yeah.
But then a poster or an experience that's Game in a Box, they can just go, "Oh, quite fancy that," click, and then it turns up at their house, or it turns up in their email. If you send someone the link as an email that is part of the experience that appears to be from this organization, I think those sorts of experiences are really interesting now, that it comes to you, it arrives at your house or on your phone or whatever it is.
And there's a degree also of it not being instantaneous gratification. Of there may be a moment where there's an instantaneous impulse to buy, but the delivery on that could be in 48 hours time. It could be in 4 to 6 weeks. It could be in 6 months. You're not quite sure. So there's that sort of sense of certainly as someone, as a person within the game field who does a lot of stuff through Kickstarter, where I'm like, I put the money down, I say, shut up and take my money, and I throw money at a thing because it sounds great right there and then. And then I might be waiting for that thing for 18 months, and by the time it arrives, I'd forgotten I backed it 18 months ago.
Yeah.
What is this? Send me this. Oh, and you open it up and you go, "Oh, it's finally here, the thing I forgot about." Which So there's
Present
a
from the past.
notification which you don't really get in
Mhm.
instantaneous online culture, let's call it.
That's a very big point for me to now say that I need to go jump into the Zoom. But this has been great, and hello to Karen. Seeing lots of like nice stuff in the chat from Karen. I should also say before I go, I don't know when is this going to go online, Alex Levine? Because I just realized I want to plug the festival next week, but this might be up after it's been and gone.
No, it should be up. All things being well, we'll get this up by Saturday morning.
Okay, great. So if you're watching this on Saturday or at some point in the next week, I've co-created a festival with my collaborator Chuck Lowry called Get on the Internet. It's a festival of hybrid work, so in-person work and online work at the very same time because we live in the future. And I'm sure Alex L will like drop a link under whatever YouTube thing this ends in, and I'm gonna jump another. Yeah. But it was really nice. It was really nice to hang out with you, Alex Kelly.
Yeah, and you, Paula. Yeah, brilliant.
So thanks a lot. This is a lovely way to spend 90 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Totally.
Thanks.
All right, see you. Bye.
Yeah. Good luck with your Twitch.
Yeah.
How multi-platform.
I know. It's as Paula says, it is the future as well as being very much the present. I wondered whether there's much more that we want to talk about. Whether there's anything. Is there any other things that popped up while we've been conversing that have made their way to the front of your brain and are itching to get out?
I think I've said all the things I made little notes of. So there's one thing I forgot to say that I wanted to say because Paula said you're really interested in WhatsApp as a platform. So I was going to mention the Secret Story Network, who do lovely WhatsApp projects. Is it a game? Is it a show? What is it? You interact with the audience, and you play a character, but the story is prepared, and it's how you. So there's a through narrative that you then respond to, and you have an objective. You have a gaming objective that might be to do with the other characters. It might be to do with you finding stuff out. So events happen to which you are an audience member, but then you also interact with the other players stroke characters, and so I think they're doing some really nice stuff, and I've got some. The first one I did, I was sort of expecting it to just be like text based, but they use video and sound and stuff really nicely. So
how did you find out about them?
Because some of the people involved in that network work at Leeds Beckett University, where I teach, and so over a cup of coffee, and then sort of discovering shared interests and stuff to do with gaming, and Anna sent me a link and said, "Oh, so this is my colleague Krishna that does this. So I think maybe you'd be interested." So I signed up. So it was
it's a recommendation, which is
recommendation. Yeah, word of mouth. Yeah.
Boom! Here it is. Not. Oh, I think you might enjoy this. Oh, I don't know how you engage with it, but I thought I liked it. You might like it.
Yeah. It's very much a. Oh, if the things you're telling me you're interested in, here's a thing that does that. So, yeah. So it was a really sort of tailored recommendation, actually. So
before we relied on an algorithm to do it for us, we relied on our.
Yeah. People telling us that something is good. So yeah. And the other thing I just thought at some point in that conversation is early on in the lockdown, I watched on Twitter as a bunch of my friends arranged to watch What I Heard About the World, a show that we had of ours that you could watch online. They arranged to watch it together at the same time that night, and that they would all. And then they had this this sort of Twitter conversation about, are you all in your seats? Okay, are we ready? Are we all pressing? And it was absolutely delightful as a maker to watch that happen, and to know that, because I sort of distrust whether a digital audience is real a little bit, and so to see people clearly like choosing to watch something, and you get stats afterwards, don't you? So many people watched the video last week, but to know that people were watching it at that moment, it was really, really lovely. So
It's interesting because we, as well as being a space for live performance, we also run a cinema screening as well, and it's been interesting to see as the pandemic moved forwards and people started to react and respond to it, that social element has been adopted by platforms. So you now have the Amazon Watch Party, where you can
yeah,
say, let's all watch this episode together at the same time in our own homes, which is exactly what I would expect from like the single biggest distribution platform service in the world.
yeah,
But I've also noticed, so there's an organization called Film Bank who deal with a lot of a very large amount of mainstream Hollywood cinema titles, and often a lot of the Disney work and things like that as well. And they're a licensing firm. Venues buy licenses so that they can screen things to the general public, and they've introduced a hybrid model as well, which allows you to have a live in-person screening in your venue, and also a time limited on demand at the same time
yeah,
that goes out through your own platform or your own network. And into that, they've built a watch along function as well. So again, like having that thing, but all very much packaged up within their proprietary, we own this side of it,
yeah,
as opposed to that slightly more DIY, crunchy. Well, let's just do this as friends and let's make it work. But it does seem to be an element that I think we can see moving forwards being adopted more widely.
yeah.
I think venues that can afford to continue to do live streaming, which hopefully is lots more.
Yeah.
But those that can, I'm interested to see what the next step is of, okay, how do we integrate those kinds of things without having to have our own in-house coding team that's going to create our own proprietary software to do it with.
Yeah. And I think actually this was one of the other things I was going to say. I think what will be really interesting is the status those events are given by organizations and venues. And so I think maybe why, if you're getting a lot of artists and companies coming to you saying, can we bring our digital project to you? I think that's because from the outside, as an artist who's worked with the place several times now, it appears to me that you are an art centre that happens to have a black box theatre space in amongst the many other things it's interested in doing. And what it's interested in doing is bringing art that is perhaps performatively led, but not necessarily, to Bedford. And the black box studio space you've got is one of the tools you have. Whereas I think some venues that are a theatre, we could do some work outside just while we need to, has been like a sort of a different approach. It appears to me from, and maybe this is because I'm outside of Bedford, that you're interested in finding the audience wherever they are in Bedford, and if they're outside Bedford on a computer, that's all right as well. But
yeah, Yeah, and I think that's the thing that underpinned like having this conversation in general, was the sense of we've had a decade of very much being focused on who's around us, and for better and worse, and with varying degrees of success, we have developed audiences, brought in new people here, brought in new people there. Whereas, yes, thank you, Karen. Yeah, I mean, the wrapping up phase, bringing it full.
Yes.
But the pandemic allowed us to reach slightly further than that, and made us then ask the question, well, yes, not just what are we doing on our doorstep, but also if we're supporting the development of new work, if we're supporting artists who are often, because of the size of our venue and because of the work we do, still in the very much in the early exploratory phase of their practice, either as individuals or as companies. Can we build on that? Can we find other mechanisms for sharing their work, not just with the people on our doorstep, but with the people that they're bringing with them as well? Because to us, to link together the physical, the digital, and the virtual is partly a way of saying, well, how do you get your work in front of as many people as you can, especially when you're in the early stages of your career, because the more people who can see your work is the more people who can respond, react, and feedback to it. And if that means bringing your show to Bedford and working really, really hard to bring in 15, 20 people who are going to come in and give feedback, but you don't, and you're based in Northern Ireland, if we can then find another way of saying, well, through our venue and through the links that we've made, we can also share it back, so it can be experienced at home, can be experienced by friends and family. People don't have to travel from where they are. They can have a way into your work. That is, putting aside it's also really great for access. It's also really great as we are still in a pandemic that, even though it's finished today,
apparently, yeah,
we won. Apparently, putting those, it's just about making sure that all the hard work and all of the thoughts that artists are working so hard to get out there can be seen by as many people as possible. And we're not playing the scarcity card, actually, when it comes to access to like high quality artistic and cultural experiences. Oh, awesome.
Great.
I think that's a really good,
very nice conclusion. Yeah.
To end on. Yeah. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining the discussion today, and also thank you to Paula for being here as well. I'm going to put things into this YouTube video. There'll be links to the festival that Paula's running. Get on the internet that's being run. A whole host of wonderful artists leading into the hybrid work that they're making through the Omnibus in Clapham. Unfortunately, I believe that all the digital work from Living Record Festival has now come off the platform. I think it came off yesterday, but if it hasn't, I'll double check and I'll put a link. But I'm sure they'll be back in 2023 with more fantastic work by emerging artists and young artists who are making exciting hybrid digital work. And if anyone out there is excited and interested to buy for themselves or their friends the Distraction Agents, where can they go to do that, Alex?
www.thirdangel.co.uk/shop, which is there are a few of them left, but they will run out because they are a finite physical object. So
brilliant. We look forward to hearing all about how successful it's been and the next iteration, the second print of the game.
The second in a whole other world. And thanks, Karen. Yes, Great. Got your email address, Fab. I'm alex@thirdangel.co.uk. So I'm quite easy to find.
And you can find all of us on various different social media platforms as well. And if you haven't had a chance to do so, and if you're really interested in digital performance and wanted to ask questions and connect up with other people who make the work, who program the work, then I really highly recommend joining the Digital Performance Network Discord that Paula excitingly set up, I think last year, where there's loads of people on there who are often sharing links to the work they're making, the questions that they're asking, and it's full of really wonderful, like-minded people working not just in the UK but across the world. Thank you so much for being here on a cold February afternoon in 2022. If you're online, thanks so much for joining us as well. And otherwise, see you again, hopefully next year, for a series more of these talks. Thanks very much for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody.